friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs podcast. I'm Ashley Elenbaas, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. Today we'll be talking about a number of different subjects, sort of loosely thread together, and all relevant for the world and the times we're living in. We'll talk about land and the power of place. We'll talk about trees as a symbol of how we hold things together and learn. We will talk about taking risks and letting go. And then a card that I pulled for today and today's topic from The Flower Speaks, which is Madonna or Easter Lily. So we'll talk about that card as well. Before we dive into today's content, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. Just one click means so much to me. Thank you, thank you. Also, please click notifications so you can hear about my talks that are released every week. And also, please like if you find this video to be helpful. I also wanted to mention for any of you that are local to Minnesota or Wisconsin, I am hosting my monthly garden gatherings starting June 1st. If you'd like to come out and garden with us, talk about plants, learn about medicine making, and just be outside with other plant people, I would love to have you. So please register online, skyhouseherbs.com. I'll include a link in the descriptions. All right, friends. So let's talk about place, the power of place. And I was thinking about this, as I'm settling in here to my fourth year living back in Minnesota, and this interesting synchronicity that came about just last night, which it was the inspiration for this talk. So I was over at my grandmother's house. She's 93, amazing woman I love so dearly. And I was telling her, she, asked what I had been doing. And um, I had said, oh, yeah, I was teaching an herb class for families at this local preschool at St. David's. And she goes, oh, St. David's. I said, yeah, I've been teaching herb classes there during the day for the kids. And then I did a family one the other night. And she's like, wait a minute. She's like, is that on Minnetonka Boulevard? Wait, I think she's like, you went there. You went to preschool there. That's where your Aunt Marty taught. And I was like, wait, what? And so we called up my mom and we got her on speakerphone. And I was like, Mom, where did I go to preschool in Minnetonka? And she's like, oh, St. David's. And I was like, what? I got goosebumps. I was like, what a magical world that I left Minnesota after preschool when I was about 4 years old. And I moved around the country and traveled around the world. And somehow I ended up back in Minnesota teaching at the very preschool I went to. Um, anyway, my mind was just really touched and my heart was really touched by that because I think what I've been learning a lot since moving back, I'm going to call it home in air quotes because, we can define home in a lot of different ways. But if we think about home as a place where we feel settled, where the land and, as the Grateful Dead say, where the climate suits your clothes, where like the climate and the people and the culture matches you on a deep level. Um, and a place where you feel like you have something to give back. I feel like that's home. And a place where you receive for certain too. That's home. So as I've been thinking about coming home, um, I was also reminded about a friend of mine who I studied with for many years, and she became a dear friend. And she studied with the 13 indigenous grandmothers. I don't know if you have heard of them, but they're worth looking up. But they're 13 women from the Amazon, Oaxaca, Tibet, Nepal, from different regions of North America and Central Africa. And all of these grandmothers came together, these 13 women, and they formed the Grandmothers Council. and they travel the world talking about traditions, like their cultural traditions and things that the young people need to know and things that will help bring order back to the world and really developing the more feminine principle on this planet again. And my friend Sanjeevani, she had studied with these women and traveled with them for years. And she said, one of the things that they spoke about was returning to the place you were born. That so many of us, we leave where we're born. And that's actually, the grandmothers said that that's actually part of becoming an adult is you have to leave the nest, right? You have to go out and have experiences. But what the earth really needs us to do is go back home and share what we've learned from going out with who has stayed back or wasn't able to leave, or, with those who have come back with other experiences from places you haven't been. But their main teaching, they had a lot of teachings, but the one that stood out to me was this idea of returning home. So I remember when she told me that, I was had just opened up our yoga studio. I was like, wait a minute, like I can't leave. I just built something. But in the back of my mind, once I heard that and she was saying, she had moved back to Canada. She's French Canadian, and she moved back to this small little town. And she said, I go every day to the lake where I grew up and I sing to the lake and I, you know, um, throw rocks into the lake and I thank the waters for giving me my life because she's like, the place that we were born was of our choosing. And the place that we were born carries such deep karmic imprints, um, and imprints us in such deep karmic ways that to go back and to give thanks to the land that bore you is a tremendous healing experience for not only us as humans walking on the land, but she said that the grandmothers taught her that it's actually healing for the land itself, that the land becomes more healed and more whole when babies that were born on it return to it. That just really hit me in a way. And I know that for everyone, it might not be possible or reasonable to move back to where you were born. There might be a lot of reasons why you shouldn't. And I do think there's something magical about returning to where you came from, even if it's just for a weekend, and giving thanks to that piece of earth or that stretch of land or to that community in some way. If there's some way you can gift your hometown something of value, uh, it feeds everyone. Everyone gets nourished by that action. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. And from my experience, being back where I was born and being surrounded by family again and plants that have been familiar that I forgot about has been so healing. And now to be able to teach the kids, the preschoolers, about the plants in a way that most people here probably don't think of them or have learned about them, um, that I can bring my experiences from Australia, from working on farms in Costa Rica, from living in the mountains of North Carolina and studying at the feet of herbalists who have lived in indigenous communities. Like there's that I can offer. I can take those things and I can bring them back home. So I think that's a nugget of wisdom that you can sit with and maybe turn over in your own mind. What are the ways you can give back to your homeland or at least, write a letter considering what you might do. The second thing I that came to my mind was from an astrology reading I received in what year would it have been? I think it was 2010. And I went to this Vedic astrologer in downtown Washington, D.C. He was like traveling through, and one of my Kundalini yoga buddies was like, you have to get a reading with him. He's so good. And I was like, okay. So I drove into DC and I went to this like fancy hotel and I went into his room, which like now looking back, like that was a little sketchy, but it was fine. He was cool. Um, and I got an astrology reading. And one of the things he said, he was like, He's like, when I look at your chart, I see all of these branches and all of this fruit, but the trunk is weak. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, what are you doing? Like, what are the things you're doing? And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. And I rattled off, oh, I teach yoga, I lead retreats, I'm in herb school, I guess I had graduated. I have an herbal apothecary, I teach herb classes, I see clients, I manage a wellness center. I mean, I was doing so many things, like really. um, and actually, what my friend Sarah, who has a great podcast called The Hardcore Therapist, she talks about busyness as a trauma response. And that really makes sense to me now that, if part of the way we deal with uncertainty and trauma and stress and anxiety is to stay busy. And, if you're a high functioner and you can handle a lot of things, then that's a great coping strategy because everyone gives you praise. Everyone pats you on the back because you're so productive and you're doing so much and you're earning, like you're keeping a roof over your head and like helping people. And yeah, like I think you can get kind of addicted and to that cycle of being affirmed and power and all of that. So, so he was saying that, the problem is that if the trunk isn't strong, if energy isn't being given to the trunk, then the branches will break off and the fruit will rot. And so he was like, you have so much energy of your life force. And one of the things you're here to do in this lifetime is to figure out how to not put so much energy into the fruits and branches and put more in the trunk. And the funny thing was my very busy mind was like, well, I'll just create my own studio. Like that's what I ended up doing a few years later was, oh, well, I'll just create a space where I can put all those things together. So I don't have to drive to 5 different studios and do my herbs here. I was like, I'll just open my own place, which um, was a step, I guess, really. I mean, isn't everything just a step in the direction that our soul is leading us? So, creating that one center did actually really consolidate my energy a lot more. And over the years, what I started to notice was how important it was that I started saying no more frequently. And I have a group of friends, we joke about that, like, did you say no today? How many times did you say no? Because, when you're a people pleaser, you tend to say yes too many times. And then you really, really, your trunk gets very weak. And the crazy thing is I was in Costa Rica doing a private teacher training. I was training a woman to become a yoga teacher. She was like, "Hey, why don't we go to Costa Rica and I'll pay you to do like a private YTT?" And I was like, "Hey, that sounds awesome." So we were doing that. Oh man, I look back on my 30s and that was a fun ride for real. Okay, but so we were in Costa Rica, we were staying in this place, and outside of the window was this beautiful banana tree, and it had these like bananas that were about to be ripe. Like they were green and a little bit reddish. And I could tell, I was like, oh, it's like 2 days and they're going to be ripe. I can reach out my window and pick that banana, peel it, and eat it. Like this is paradise. And in the middle of the night, I heard this big crack and it woke both of us up. We were like, what was that? And everything seemed okay. So we went back to sleep. Well, you know what? In the morning, that banana tree trunk cracked in half. It had gotten so heavy from all of the fruit. And you know what? When I looked down at the fruit, I was like, well, maybe I can still get a banana. No, it was like all the animals had gotten to it and had completely devoured it and destroyed it. And and that was like maybe 6 months after I had gotten that astrology reading. So that lesson was still really like clear in my mind. And then that happened. And I was like, oh, this is real. Like I'm getting signs here, guys. Like I'm doing too much. And so that I started, pulling my energy back into my trunk and really starting to reflect on the idea of who am I if I'm not the things I'm doing? And what are my needs that are separate from what I'm doing? So those were like big questions that I took with me for years. And slowly, slowly, I think until I took my recent sabbatical, um, have kind of, I'm sure I'll come back to this again every decade, but I feel like in this decade, I'm like, okay, self-care. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. We're so busy in the outer world taking care of all the other things that we forget that we have a trunk and that none of those things can grow and become sweet and ripen if we're not okay. And yeah, it's like I just am so grateful for the images and for the work of astrologers out there and just these symbols of learning about how the soul works and how the soul wisens. And I think that I'm sure I'm not alone in terms of people who invest so much in the fruits and invest so much time and energy in the branches. And so now that I'm actually in my root, like I'm in my trunk and in my roots again, um, it's like a whole different ball game. And the I know that my fruits will be there. Like I know that I'm planting seeds and developing things that will persist, that will last, um, and that they won't take me down in the process because that can happen. That definitely can happen. The third thing is taking risks because once we realize that things need to change, like we need to move, or we're not living in a place that is actually good for us mentally, physically, emotionally, or once we realize that the career path we have chosen is actually not rewarding to the person we've become. This is that classic middle age crisis or middle age opportunity, as I like to call it. This moment where you really take stock of where you've ended up and ask yourself, is this where I want to keep going? You have agency, you have choice. Is this where is this the track you want to continue down? And it's really scary and really hard to make a change. And it's always worth it. When you get that feeling, and I see it in other people. Um, I just got my hair cut. Isn't it nice? So my hairstylist, for example, she is moving salons again. And I don't care. Like I'll go wherever she goes because I really like her. I like the way she cuts my hair. So, but she was like, do you think it's too much? Like, I just hope I don't lose clients. And, it's a lot of big changes. And I was like, well, what did your gut say? She's like, in my gut, I know that this is going to be a better place for me. And I'm so excited about it. I was like, well, amen. Like, that's it, right? Like, that's the validation when we know in our gut, like, no matter what it looks like on the outside, right? Because there's always going to be someone that you could think of who's going to think something. Chances are people are not actually even thinking about you. Turns out people don't really spend that much time obsessing about other people's lives. Um, so, but we do that. We think, well, what will other people think if I make this change? If I make this choice? Will it ruin or change my image in some way? But really, the question is like, how do I feel and how will I feel if I make this choice? If I make this change? What could get better? And yes, there is risk, and risk is scary. And nothing ever happens out of the ordinary unless you step into a place of wonder and a place of spontaneity and a place. And I'm not saying like just pick up and move anywhere, but like spontaneity in your spirit. That idea, my husband and I say this all the time to each other and to our kids, which is I can change my mind. Like I can do something the same way for 45 years and I can wake up and say I don't want to do it that way. I can change my mind. And just like that we can change things in our lives. If there's like I gave up coffee today. Can you believe it? I love coffee. It's like oh, I live for it. I think about it when I'm going to sleep. It's the first thing I think about when I wake up. I think about it in the afternoon about my next cup in the morning. And I've been having these throat voice things, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. And so I made a choice last night. And in our family prayer time, I just said, God help me give up coffee for a little while until I can figure out what's going on with my throat. And let's just see and give me the strength to do that. And I woke up and I did it. And I know from my work in 12 steps in recovery that it's really one day at a time. You just take it one day, one moment, one decision at a time. And that's how it is with even big life changes. You get that feeling like it's time to make a big shift. And once that feeling gets strong enough and that voice gets loud enough, then you just start putting one foot in front of the other. And if it keeps flowing and it keeps feeling, even if there's trepidation, it's like I can feel that I'm being drawn in the direction my soul wants me to go in, not my mind, right? And that is what brought me home to Minnesota. So I would encourage you to take risks, whatever they are in your world right now, because it likely looks very different. But that was just one little thing I wanted to add into today's talk. And I just want to say today's talk. Oh, I just grabbed some ideas. So uh I hope you like the stream of consciousness as much as you like my measured, very detail oriented plant talks, because, we can do more than one thing, right? All right. So here is the card that I pulled for today. Let's see if I can get it in focus. It's a little bright, but this is Easter Lily. So I asked the cards a question. I said, what is a plant that is helpful for when we're in a time or for just helping to think about the idea of the importance of place, of coming back to your center, and of taking risks. And this was the card that came up. So let me just read it for you. This is from the Flowers Speaks deck. Easter lily may signify a time of retreat from the outer world so that you may devote sacred time to becoming whole again. Creating a space for yourself, either physically or internally, can help you resurrect your inner fire and rekindle your passion for life. Perhaps you are choosing to fast or to be celibate in order to replenish yourself. Perhaps you just need time alone to reflect upon the events of your life and what it is that makes you feel fulfilled. And this card, the tagline is devotion. And so one of the things it speaks to is, one of the keys to what the 13 grandmothers are speaking of, which is embodying this deep well of feminine wisdom. And we can be in a male or female body, like it's not gender, but it's more the energy that we have to be devoted to something larger than ourselves. And we have to take time to nourish the trunk. If we're not giving back and nourishing ourselves with good food and clean water and lots of rest and time in nature, it, I know it seems like those things, they can seem really hard, but they're not once you devote yourself to loving yourself and caring for yourself, just like you would care for a plant or a child or a garden. Your whole being needs that same tending. And you know, ideally, you have a community around you that helps with that. But ultimately, we know that that work is our own as we mature into adulthood. It's our work to identify what our needs are. And it's our work to take responsibility for getting our needs met and doing so in a loving and kind way. And so I think about Easter lily. Matthew Wood in his book, um, Seven Herbs, Plants as Teachers, talks about Easter lily as being an herb that balances and harmonizes opposites, especially when it comes to polarized thinking about sexuality, like either being very promiscuous or being celibate or I think just in energy in general, like giving or taking. And some people live where they feel very, polarized by that. They feel like they have to be in one or the other extreme. And Easter Lily says, no, no, there's actually a place of harmony in the middle, if you tap into the soul and tap into devotion. And Easter lily as a medicine, it's the root bulb that's used. It's a very cooling, demulcent, very deep yin rebuilding, deep water energy, restorative. So it makes a lot of sense that it would come up as we talk about home and place and nurturing ourselves, and then taking risks and having the courage to change. Because, yeah, like who wants to stay the same all the time? I don't know. I don't think any of us really do. All right, friends, that's what I have for today. I hope maybe one little nugget stuck out that you can take with you and stick it in your pocket. And as always, I would love your feedback. Let me know what you thought. If you have any questions, comments, and please subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope to see you either in my garden over the summer or back on this channel again soon. Bye, everyone.